Hello and welcome back to France Made Simple, the podcast where I demystify life in France, debunk some of the many myths that surround those of us that are living here, and generally tell it like it is. And part of telling it like it is revealing that, funnily enough, life in France isn't one long bed of roses, a Perot hour, etc., etc. It can be difficult, it can be tough, it can be a struggle, and people can often end up feeling very isolated and alone, whether they are in fact living alone or they're in a relationship, in a family situation. I think we all go through moments where the French dream becomes pretty much the French nightmare. And that, combined with a kind of lack of social circle, the support network that perhaps we had back in our own home countries, can prove really, really difficult. Now, as many of you know, I've talked a lot on the podcast about therapy previously, and I'm a great believer in therapy. I think everybody should be in therapy all of the time. We all have stuff we need to process. So I'm really pleased that this morning I've got Julia in the studio, who is a real live therapist living and working here in France and online. And I thought it would be very good to have a chat about what she does and what she can do for any of you who are listening and think that this might perhaps be of help. So, hello, Julia.
Hi. Hi.
Thanks for Thanks for coming in today. It's great to have you here. So I was thinking that maybe we could start by you introducing yourself and revealing a bit about your background and even how you came to be here in France.
Sure, sure. So yes, I'm Julia, and I've been living in France now for just over 3 years. We moved here in January 2023, in Normandy, and yes, I am a counsellor from hailing from the UK, um, and so my background. I suppose it depends on how far back we go, but some of it is quite relevant if I go quite far back.
Okay. Right, let's go quite far back.
Well, in that, my first kind of career was with animals, and I worked with horses for the first part of my life, and then went into education. And I worked in education for 15 years. And when I came out of education, I ended up working for Blue Cross. So I went back working with kind of animals and people this time, animals and people. And my role there was actually with a subsidiary company or charity with Blue Cross, which was called the Society for Companion Animal Studies. And that little charity actually formed the pet bereavement support service,
All
which
right.
I think is still running actually through Blue Cross. And so I was involved with supporting the helpline, which it was a helpline for people to call in, and training volunteers who were on the helpline. Um, Alongside that, we were actually very involved in creating standards for animal assisted interventions. So, nature-based therapies, but specifically bringing animals into a variety of intervention, what we call interventions, which could be something like, it could be psychotherapy, it could be physiotherapy, any kind of activity, I suppose, which were a lot was sort of healing professions, but bringing animals in, so therapy, pets, going into hospitals and things like that. Um, so we were sort of very involved with that. Um, that charity kind of broke away from Blue Cross, and I actually ran that charity for a few years. And coming off the back of that, I then helped Cats Protection set up their helpline for pet bereavement, which was called Pause to Listen, I believe. And so I helped them for a few years. In amongst all that, I also trained as a counsellor. So I suppose at some point with Cats Protection and coming out of there, I went into becoming a sort of a counsellor. Uh,
That that's really interesting because I've actually got horses,
mm,
and I have got a one of them is very difficult because she had a very sort of traumatic past, and I've got very into. I have a friend who does equitherapy and equi coaching, and it's very very interesting to see how my body and regulation and mood can affect hers and vice versa. And I think it's a kind of very evolving thing, the equine therapy. And I know that there's this friend of mine who is now doing a lot of work with companies who send people who've got no horse experience whatsoever to go and work with horses, because how they react changes the horse's behavior, and it's all about managing your own emotions, and it's a fascinating subject. I think it really
it
is.
really is. Yeah, it is. We, as a species, we do bond with other species, and our pets and our animals, especially if they become part of our family. We do create this incredibly strong bond, which can only be likened to a parent child bond, actually. And so, an incredibly strong thing, um, which, of course, also, you know, apart from lending itself to including animals in a therapeutic situation, it also means that when we lose our animals, it has a huge impact on us. For many people, more so than the humans they've lost,
Mm,
um, because we don't have a dialogue with our animals. And so there is, something missing in understanding what the pet is going through, and wondering if the pet understands what we're going through, you know so pet loss in itself has become very well, it's always been very disenfranchised. So we as
mm.
a society, we don't really see it as a proper loss, even though we are, nations of animal lovers and pet lovers, and so people can really feel quite alone with that.
Yeah.
um, you know, but yes, I mean, on a therapeutic level, at working in a nature-based environment, whether it's animals or the trees, the garden, the plants, any aspect of that can really, well, I mean, research has sort of confirmed that being in nature relaxes us for a
Mm.
start, generally. Unless you're in a storm in Normandy. Which-
Well, I have to say, I actually found last night's storm very therapeutic and relaxing, because I was aware that I didn't need to go and water my vegetable patch, and that we
yes.
really needed the water. So
But
I do find storms very invigorating,
yeah.
as well. So there's that energy. It's, yeah.
Yes. And also, I work a lot on the computer as well. And, having to shut down the computer and unplug it is rather liberating at times. So you can enjoy a storm by actually, just shutting down everything and just being in the moment, which of course, again,
We don't do enough, because
right?
yeah, no, exactly. We're connected all of the time, 24/7, pretty much. And it is those occasions when you do have an extended power cut and you realize you can't hoover, you can't do the ironing, you can't do this, that, or the other. It does force you to be in the moment and
Yes.
disconnect, and like being in it, the same as being in nature, and
Yes.
hopefully not taking your phone with you when you're on a walk.
Yeah. Ironically, you're forced to disconnect from the network, but forced to connect with other things like yourself, and nature around you, the ground, the animals, the air,
Yeah, yeah,
breathing,
yeah,
how we're exchanging that air with the trees, you know, as we breathe our carbon dioxide out, they're feeding us oxygen, and
yeah,
recognize that kind of real being part of nature. We're not out in nature, we are nature.
yeah.
We're
No, that's very, very true, actually. That is very true. So you've been in France for what, 3 years now?
Yes, just over, yeah.
And
Yeah.
how's it been for you?
I mean, the general consensus is I love it, love it. Um, But of course, I think anybody that comes here, particularly post Brexit, will have experienced, a certain level of stress, and particularly with administration and getting sorted. I mean, it's easy to say when you've got things sorted, oh, it wasn't that bad. But it is stressful. There is a certain amount of unknown, especially if you're not fluent in French when you arrive. Um, and then suddenly you arrive and your boiler, your oil tank is empty and you need to find some oil and it's the middle of winter and, those sorts of things can be really stressful. But also, as you go through that process of organizing your healthcare and, and your tax and things like that,
Mm,
really, really worrying. And I think, certainly since Brexit, and I can't speak for pre Brexit because I'm not party to that experience, but
mm,
certainly post Brexit, there is this fear. There's a real fear that if you do something wrong, you're going to be sent away, you know. And so a lot of the people that moved here around the same time as me, there is this real sense of fear that we're living on borrowed time here that in a minute we're going to do something wrong and be sent away you know so I think
that's yeah, that's really interesting. It's something that I haven't been aware of, I suppose, because I came here such a long time ago for one, and for two, most of the people I know have been here for a fairly long time too. So that hasn't affected us. I was really unaware of that fear. That must be very stressful for people.
yeah, I mean when I came, when I applied for my visa, um there was a big group of us, and obviously we were applying to become an entrepreneur visa, or have an entrepreneur visa. And when I was applying for mine, the Ministry of Interior Affairs website, where you had to submit your business plan to show that you'd be able to, you know, support yourself
Support
for the next.
yourself. Hmm.
It was broken, and so in true French style, it's like, well, you have to submit it, and you go, well, I can't submit it, and they go, yes, but you have to submit it, and it's like, oh, real stuck. And so there was a big group of us from that period who all were sort of, going, oh, we don't know
And
what
it's
to
like,
do. And it was broken for about 5 or 6 weeks. So it wasn't like a sort of, it'll be back tomorrow. Um, and so we formed this little Facebook group that was, basically people checking it's up, and sort of, and
quick.
yeah. So actually, there was this group of us that were all, coming with basically the same visa and at the same time. And so it's really interesting to have that kind of support of people.
Mm,
And I think that was really valuable at the time because of that stress level and being able to go, well, what have you done here?
mm,
What did you do? And think, oh, I've done this. Even that said, of course, even amongst a group of people who are applying for the same visa at the same time, our business plans are all different. So some people were coming here to run jeets and B&Bs. Others were sort of profession liberal like myself, doing other things. In some ways, I think it was probably a lot easier for me because I already had my business in the UK and it was essentially just closing it there and reopening it here. So I could prove my income projections and things because nothing had changed apart from the location and the sort of underlying protocols. But yeah, so I think for me it was even perhaps a little bit easier. But
mm,
yes, that real sort of there was a very big sense of fear, you know? And
mm,
I know that, several of the people in that group have already returned to the UK.
really.
Yeah, because they just couldn't cope with the stress of it, you know? When it came round to, and again, those who came here pre-Brexit won't have experienced this yet, perhaps, where, every year we then have to go and renew our carte de séjour and prove our existence still
Mm,
every. Well, it didn't turn out to be every year because I think there was such a backlog that they started giving out 4-year. carte de séjour, and I have one of those now. But the first year, and I am aware that there are people who are falling short of the minimum wage when they go to renew their 1 year visa to a carte de séjour. They're being refused and sent home.
That is really, really tough. And that's, yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the sort of sword of Damocles hanging over you permanently, isn't it? That has
yeah,
got to be incredibly stressful. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
the visa thing is something I've become more recently aware of because I've got a friend who's an American who has been here for 8 years and her husband has got a 10-year visa, but she hasn't. And she's now got to pass the language test, which has
Yes,
gone up as well.
yes.
So yeah, I can see why people are kind of overwhelmed.
Yes. And also the minimum wage. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, so don't nobody quote me on this. But I'm pretty sure that when I applied, the minimum wage was around 13,000 a year.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
That's just bearing in mind that's just over 3.5 years ago. It's now over 20.
Is it? Wow, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that either. Though. Okay. Yeah.
So for people who are wanting to apply for those visas first time around, but also people who have arrived and then having to go back a year later and say, yes, I have made my minimum wage this year and I'm still anticipating doing that in the
Mm,
next, 3 years. And if they can't do that, the worry that actually everything, because a lot of us have given up everything, we've sold everything in the UK to come here, and, the thought that actually after a year that could be like, well, yeah, no.
yeah. No, that is quite a big deal, actually. Yeah, and it's something that I think I was kind of pretty unaware of in my blissful ignorance of, being a French national now. And yeah, I think the whole it was so much easier to come here pre-Brexit, and I'm sure that an awful lot of the people that did come here pre-Brexit would never have made it post-Brexit because, they just didn't, they weren't producing any income, at least for the first few
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
So no, that is a big stress. It's something that I hadn't factored in. And, what are the other things that you see in your practice that are real kind of hurdles for people here?
yeah. I think, one of the obviously that's a big thing, is that it's not just about what's happening, it's how we respond to it. And
Mm,
so, anxiety is actually a killer. you
yeah,
know, Stress,
literally.
it literally will kill you. But anxiety in itself, fear of things. If we're living in that state all the time, we're not really designed to live in what we call hyper arousal. We if I can get kind of techie for a minute, psycho techie, we live in this kind of what we call a window of tolerance, and this is where we function best, right? And then when we get stressed and produce stress hormones and become anxious, is what we call hyper arousal. So our heart rate increases, our blood starts moving faster, and cortisol enters the system, and adrenaline and noradrenaline, and all these different hormones and proteins are being pushed around our system. And we enter what we call hyperarousal. Um, and that is where anxiety resides. Hyperarousal is intended for flight or fight. It's intended for when we go into battle or we need to scoot. So residing there is fundamentally going to cause damage to our nervous system and to the
Yeah.
way that we function and the way that we think about things. So, going up into hyperarousal and living here in this kind of, anxiety state, eventually what happens is that our nervous system says, I can't do that anymore. And what will happen is you'll tumble off into what we call hypoarousal. Okay. And this is where everything slows down. Our body systems all slow down. And if you reside in hypoarousal, this is where depression resides.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And so as in Western society, what often happens is we flip between the two. So, we spend very little time in our window of tolerance where we're
Yeah.
actually, our bodies and our minds
Just sort of
and our
like all nice and calm and everything's
right
ticking along.
and
It's like, yeah,
functioning and everything's fine. So what we do is we end up in this hyper arousal for too long. We fall off into hypo and get depressed. Then we try desperately hard to clamber back up and we end up flipping right back up into hyper arousal and we go between the two, you know?
mm,
And
yeah,
so what happens if over a long prolonged period of doing that is that, the body just goes, I
yeah,
don't know what to do now. And we end up having some kind of breakdown, where actually we can't function anymore, you know.
mm,
So aside from the fact that, coming to a new country where perhaps you don't speak fluent French, you've got this bureaucracy and administration and expectations that you have to live up to be here. Some of the administration can be not very friendly, and so all of that is also tapping into how we respond to stuff. So, one person may cope with all this quite well, and another person won't cope with it at all. Like I said, some people in that little group of people that came over here at the same time have already left. And some of them left quite quickly. They were like, whoa, I can't do this,
yeah,
you know? And so each individual has been trained through our lifetime to deal with things in a different way. So if we don't deal with anxiety particularly well, um, and we end up flipping in that sort of up and down
mm,
mode very quickly, then we're more likely to end up in a state where actually we can't function particularly well, you know
yeah,
something that you mentioned earlier is kind of aloneness, even when we're not alone. And again, coming to this beautiful country where there's a lot of nature and stuff like that, we'd sort of think, well, that we've arrived. I mean, we surely would be happy now, right? You know,
exactly. Yeah, there's that expectation that, oh, wow, I've got
yeah.
this beautiful house and this great garden and plot of land and I should be happy.
And why aren't I?
Mm,
What's wrong with me?
yeah,
You know, and of course, there's nothing wrong inherently with most people, and I think that is something that as a counselor, we're up against this belief that counseling is for people who are broken and need fixing, I mean, obviously we can help people, but actually that's not the best use of it, because we're not here to fix people. And counseling is not for broken people because actually most people aren't broken. Um, Even though we live in a society which pathologizes most things, right?
mm,
And so we are led to believe that if you're depressed, oh, it's because you've got a chemical imbalance in your brain and you're ill and have some medication,
yeah,
right? Where, in actual fact, your brain was behaving exactly as we would expect it. Exactly. You know,
yeah,
if you go into hyperarousal, you're in fight or flight, because of fear or whatever's caused that, maybe you actually as a child were trained to be up there, you
mm,
know? And so even now in rural France where you're, in your garden, why am I still feeling anxious? Why am I still responding this way? Well, because you were trained incredibly well to be there, you know? And so for a lot of people, when we arrive in this peaceful environment, actually there is space to wonder and space for these thoughts and memories and stuff to come up. And actually thinking, well, like you say, why aren't I happy now?
yeah,
And, it's kind of an old saying, but you have to be happy in yourself, and if you can't escape it. You can't escape the pain, the memories, what needs processing. You can go anywhere in the world. You will not escape it because you carry it with you, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not terminal. That's not permanent. But you have to sit with it and you have to process it in order to let it go, you
Mm,
know? And so when people, I mean, I've seen lots of people who will jump from one thing to the next. Or I'll go here, everything will be fine as long as I can go there. And if I can just do this, everything will be fine. It won't. It won't, because what needs looking at is in here. And it
yes.
doesn't matter where you are, you
Yeah.
know,
Or,
to look at
or
that.
Or I think often people do that with what they have.
Yes,
If I can just get this, if I can just buy that, if I can just do this, if I can just get, and
yes,
it's that next step constantly. And you're absolutely spot on. It's because it's within ourselves. And I guess that's why when people come here and for the first time, perhaps they've stepped off the treadmill a bit, even if they are still working and running gîtes or setting up a business, the other sort of day-to-day stuff that took up all of their time and their lives in a sort of rat race, if we use that term, existence, they've suddenly got more time for those feelings and emotions to come flooding in.
yes, yes. Because
Mm.
we need that space. We tend to crowd our heads with noise in Western society. We work, music, television, computers, phones, everything. It's all there to create lots of noise so that we, God forbid that we'd actually have to sit with ourselves
Yeah,
in
yeah.
silence. you know.
Yeah, yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and and I've seen this because, as you know, I've been running Survive France since 2009, and that came about because I had a blog and I realised there was this need for some kind of support, and obviously, in the last few years, therapy, and especially since COVID, online therapy has really taken off. But prior to that, I don't think in the sort of early 2000s, most people were not even thinking about talking about therapy, let alone thinking about doing it or even doing it. And I think that this, I definitely picked up on this sense of isolation that people had when they came here because that noise, that distraction had been turned off. And it wasn't that something inside them had changed. It was that it was the first time they had the space for those things to come in, and yeah, leads to depression and just feeling like, as you said, like I should be enjoying my perfect, in inverted commas, lifestyle, and I'm not. What's wrong with me?
Yeah, yeah. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I often will say to clients, and I have to be really careful how I say to it, because when we say there's nothing wrong with you, it can be really easy to misinterpret that as I am dismissing what you're feeling, because of
Mm,
the language that a lot of us were brought up with. There's nothing wrong with you. Right.
yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely.
you know, we're trained from a very young age that, especially if you come from, Britain, right? We're trained incredibly well from a young age that we don't need to get upset. Yeah. Right from a child falls over. Yeah. And they, because whether they've hurt themselves or not, it's a shock to fall over. Right. And what do? We go, don't cry. Don't cry. It's all right. You don't need to cry. Right. Stop Stop making me feel uncomfortable with your emotion,
Yeah, it's very, very
right?
true. Yeah.
And when I was teaching, veterinary practices about how to support people who have lost their pets, they go, oh, well, I put my, oh, it's okay. Don't cry. Don't cry.
Mm,
Don't cry. Why? And we often do that. We often go to this kind of default mode of, I need you to stop doing what you're doing because it's really uncomfortable. I need you to be happier now, please. And
yeah.
so, those are not obviously not the words we use. We use like, oh, here, have a tissue. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And we think it's comforting, which we are. In our hearts, that's what we're doing. We want to comfort them. But actually, if we take just a step back and see what is it we're actually doing? Where's the
Mm,
truth here? Why do we want them to stop crying?
yeah.
Why do we want to stop them from displaying their pain? Because actually it makes us feel really uncomfortable, or it even triggers our own pain. Because we know, and in a delightful way, that's an evidence of empathy, right? So if you feel like you need to sort of reach out to somebody who's upset and stop them from being upset, that is evidence that you have empathy. Hurrah, right? But actually, what would be really great is if we could go, yeah, okay, because true empathy is going, yeah, I can feel that. I can
Mm,
feel, and I'll be with you with that. And not
yeah.
just, but to just be with them because you do know what it's like.
Mm,
You know what that feels like. And just to sit with them in that, you know? I often say the counselor's job is to sit in the pile of shit with the client
right.
happily,
Yeah. That is a really good analogy. I like that one. Yeah.
not to pull them out, not to
No.
try and make it into something else, just sit there with them.
Yeah. I suppose. Yeah. Sit there till they're ready to get out themselves. I
Yeah,
see. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh.
Because actually, not being alone in the pile
Yeah.
actually is sometimes enough for somebody to sort of think, okay, I'm not alone.
Yeah. And I think that I'm not alone thing is so, so, so important for people here. And I think it's all part of them moving to a new country and losing the social circle that you had and then having to recreate that. And obviously, as we know, that can't be recreated overnight.
Mm,
And just in terms of the neighbours that you had, okay, you have new neighbours, but they're going to be different. Even if they're lovely, they're not better or worse, they're different. And the
mm,
same with friends, and you probably left friends that you've spent years, being friends with, and you have shared history and whatever else. And now people are trying to recreate that with a new friend group, and it can't be recreated overnight. So there's that, again, that sense of loss, I suppose. Um, and then that does, I think, lead to people feeling alone
yeah,
and feeling isolated. And they are actually socially isolated because even if they know lots of people, they don't have those kind of, I suppose, like tree roots, that kind of things that have been created over many, many, many
mm,
years that nurture us and keep us upright, basically.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's you said something there, and it's just escaped me, but it'll come back because it just reminded me of something. But yes, I mean, when we come to somewhere and those networks, and of course, it won't be the same. Actually,
Yeah.
you can't recreate anything. All you
No.
can do is create new,
Mm,
because you are different. I
mm,
know what I was going to say. Okay, so loss, we is another one of those things where we think, well, I chose to come here. I love it here. So why am I feeling, that loss of what I've left behind? And even when we make those choices ourselves, there is a loss.
mm,
Some of it is developmental loss and some of it is circumstantial loss. Okay. And we experience those things right from day one, right?
mm,
When we're born, you know, developmental losses are often a trade. Okay. So we lose something, but we get something in return. When we lose our milk teeth, we get our big teeth, right? There's a developmental loss. When we
yeah.
leave home, we lose the security of our family home, but we gain independence and our own space. So those are developmental losses, and they're kind of generally easier to deal with.
Mhm.
These technically would be developmental losses in the sense that we have lost something but gained something. Circumstantial losses don't always have that. So if we lose a loved one, for example, it doesn't feel like, great, I get what, you know. So a circumstantial loss can be much more powerful. Um, but again, it's an assumption that it's a developmental loss coming here because, people come here for different reasons, you know.
Mm.
And so it all gets very complex. It's not as simplistic as, some of what I'm describing, because we're all such complex individuals,
Mm.
and our decisions and the things that we've left behind, and our decisions to make those, those changes, um, are all going to be different, but also we're going to respond to them differently because of how we are, programmed. And when I say programmed, most of what we learn from a very young age. And I know that this is a bit kind of like, oh, okay, the Freudian kind of, oh, it's all of my childhood. Well, the reality is that's when you do most of your kind of cognitive early learning.
Yeah.
It's pre-verbal, actually, is where you
Yeah.
believe, when you learn your place in the world, and the other people around you, their place in the world. So as
Yeah.
babies, we come into this world and everything revolves around us. Oh, if I cry, then food comes. These are our very early learning patterns.
Mm.
And then, so therefore, we believe we're the center of the universe, right? You know,
Until we get a sibling.
right. Or you get to a point where actually, no, you can't have that.
Mm. What?
Yeah. And we end up with what we call, the terrible twos and things like that, where
Mm.
actually this little person is learning where their place is in the world. And there's a loss there, right? Because they thought they were the center of the universe. And this is why, as children, we often blame ourselves,
Mm.
right? Even if we don't know we're doing that, if it's not a cognitive thing, if we don't have the thought processes to kind of put that into some kind of articulated words, what we recognize, if we're the center of the universe and this has just happened, then is intrinsically my fault. So when mum and dad split up, or a sibling dies, or those sorts of things, as a child, there is an inherent belief that it's because of them.
Right.
And words won't get past that. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. But
Yeah.
actually, most of us grow up believing it is our fault. Everything.
Yeah,
Right?
which then feeds back into the loop that we were talking about earlier, that people move here and are not
Yes.
ecstatically happy. So it must be my fault. It's my fault.
Right. It's
It's my
because
fault.
I'm broken. I'm wrong.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm not good enough. There's a big, if you peel back the onion layers of most people, there are some narrative things in the center, which are usually one of a few, which is, it's because I'm not good enough. It's
Mm.
because I'm unlovable,
Mm.
you know, those sorts of kind of core beliefs are then what inform everything we do, every relationship. Yeah.
Mm.
And we often have what we call negative automatic thoughts. And those will be those types of things. Oh, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
That thought that comes into your head. Oh, it's so easily, right? It's just
Mm.
there waiting for you to feel a bit vulnerable or overwhelmed, and then go bing,
Yeah.
because I'm not good enough. Oh, it's
Yeah.
always me.
Yep.
Those little sentences that regurgitate as soon as there's a bit of, unrest in
Yeah.
ourselves. And that's, those messages were given to us before we can even remember,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
before we
Really.
can even remember. And then they are reinforced through school and,
Hmm.
everything that we do in society, to a point where we then tell ourselves that,
Yeah. And
and
then,
we reinforce it
yeah.
for the rest of our lives,
And then,
unless
yeah.
we can actually, find a kind of point where we go, oh, wait. And often for people, that is therapy,
Yeah. No,
where they
exactly.
actually, have somebody going, it's actually what you've been telling yourself and what you were told
Mm.
about you is just wrong.
Yeah.
And undoing that isn't in a sentence.
No, it does take time. It does take time.
I mean, many of us have come here in our kind of late middle age, so we're
Mm.
all arriving in our 50s and, so we've had a long time to establish these beliefs about ourselves. And so it's going to take a bit of work to kind of process some of that and undo it. And it can be undone, by the way. I
Yeah.
think it's worth saying.
No, that's absolutely what I was going to say. It may take time, but it is absolutely worth doing. And yes, it definitely, most definitely can be undone. And I think that's probably a very good note to end on, because I've
Mm.
just had a look at the time and I know that we could probably ramble on for hours because this is
Yes.
super interesting, but maybe we can get you back at a later date. But if anybody listening would like to get in touch, and I will put Julia's contact details and website link in the show notes, you can get hold of her. You work both in person and online. That's correct, isn't it? Yeah.
That's So I still have some UK clients, and so I'm still doing online with an app that's very easy to use and secure. And yes, here in Normandy, and we will often go into the garden and use whatever we you would like to out there as well.
And I can add here, I have actually been to Julia's garden and had a look around it myself, and it is absolutely amazing and one of the most beautiful, tranquil, quietest and soothing places I've ever been to. So if you are able, if you are in Lower Normandy, I definitely recommend doing it in person rather than online. But for the rest of you out there listening all over France and the UK and the rest of the world, because I have listeners in all kinds of places now, it's quite surprising, but I do. Do get in touch if there are issues that have come up in this podcast that you'd like to talk about with somebody. Julia, thank you so much for coming on this morning. It's been brilliant, really interesting. And, thank you. Basically, just thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always a joy to talk about stuff.
Yes, stuff. All right. Thank you as always to our sponsors, Fab French Insurance. And please do like and follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, because it really does help people find us. Thank you for listening and see you next time. Bye bye.